Good morning, all. And today we have a one-off, I think, interesting little thing. Patsy and I were discussing this earlier during the year. We thought it might be a good idea. And this is, well, let me get me the little crib sheet. Goodreads. What are friends reading? You're a literal bunch, you lot. So probably reading something quite good, interesting. And I would like us to actually say, kind of, we're reading and why perhaps we're reading it. And as my ego wouldn't let me do otherwise, I'm going to show you first what I'm reading. First of them being a wonderful book I discovered while I was volunteering at the Oxfam shop. I saw it on the shelf and thought, that looks interesting, and have really taken great pleasure in reading it. And without further ado, I will show it to you. There you go.
Oh. God.
And it's by her. What a strange name. Vulgar.
Okay.
But as it says, it is a history of food and class in England today. And it's fascinating because she goes into the idea of before the First World War, when people had servants in their houses and all this lot, you had lunch and tea or dinner, and you had supper, and different people had it at different times because, if you've got your cook to actually produce your food and servants to serve it to you, you found yourself in a different social strata than the rest of the hoi polloi. And it was how you thought about food, what you ate, why you ate it, when you ate it, what you called it. And really is a fascinating little book. Also, in a bit of it, which I admire her for putting other people's in. She was talking about London street life in the early and mid 19th century of Charles Lamb and Henry Mayhew. Henry Mayhew was one of the people I studied quite a lot, did the Poor in London, brilliant chap, worth reading. And it took, and she said this, quote, it took George Orwell to bang the drum to the readers of The Road to Wigan Pier. And in it, he said, and what it was on about was the poor often resist the wonderful plans we think up for them because they do not share a faith in the sort of food. When you're unemployed, it is to say that you are underfed, harassed, bored, miserable. You don't want to eat dull, wholesome food. You want something that's a little bit tasty. There's always some cheaper, pleasant thing to tempt you. Let's have a 3-penn'orth chips. Run out and buy a tuppenny ice cream. Put the kettle on, we'll have a nice cup of tea. That's how the mind works. White bread and marge and sugary tea don't nourish you to any extent, but they are nicer. Or at least most people think so, than brown bread and dripping and cold water. That's so true, that we think people shouldn't eat that nasty food, but how many do? How many kind of sneak aside the jam donut and things like that? We know we shouldn't eat them so much, but we do. And just for a thing, I will a few chapter headings. The sandwich. Sandwich is an amazing thing because we always eat it quite a lot of it. People eat it in different ways. The start of the Earl of Sandwich, who produced sandwiches because he didn't want to stop gambling, apparently. Parking? Does anybody remember parking?
My daughter made it for me last week.
Lovely stuff.
It's gorgeous.
Very sweet. Type of thing, Oh yes, meat, Britishy type things. The roast beef of old England. Spice beef for Christmas.
Mm.
Roast chicken. Mashed potato. Cornish pasties have now got apparently their identity. You can't call it Cornish pasty if it's not made in Cornwall, apparently, nowadays.
Mm. Mm.
The gravy wars. What is gravy? Do you like gravy in heaps, large pots of it? Then, if you do, you're definitely working class, dear.
Mm.
Because if you don't, it is the French idea of tiny little globules of very, very cooked down meat. They can actually cook a roast a bit of beef really down to what, if you need me to say it, jus, Jus. It is the French idea of gravy.
Yeah.
Pa, I say. But there you go. Where we sit to eat. Does it really matter where we sit to eat? And apparently so. It depends on who you are. And if you sit down to table, and remember to keep your children at the table to eat their food. Do we do it anymore, or do we sit in front of the telly? Sit in front of the telly. But eating on my own. So that types of things. Oh yes, the other thing. Doilies, napkins, tablecloths, all of a very old type of thing, but they all come in to say that, this is what you eat. This is how you eat. You have it formalized if you are of the higher echelons. Sometimes not so. Venison pasty, anybody? Apparently, in the 18th, 17th century, they were the things which the hoi polloi ate. Rather like oysters. Oysters being very expensive nowadays. But in London, in Mayhew's time, the poor ate oysters. They were poor people's food. How things change, my friends. Different types of milk. If you go in the supermarket nowadays, you look at all the milk you can get. Heaps of different types of milk, not just ordinary cow milk. But it goes on about this type of thing. Yeah. Oh yes, bread. How you make your bread. If you buy it from the shop, if you buy it from an artisan bakery, if you get your cook to make your bread, it all goes to classical things as well, So, and Brussels sprouts, are they for Christmas, or are they a thing which we should eat all the time with bacon and with chestnuts and with other types of things? Love a Brussels sprout, me, but there you go. Oh yes, and something which I used to be able to tempt my sisters with at any time to make them feel nice to me. Chocolate used in cookery, used in all types of things, and or in different ways. My friend, the Christopher Denham, likes a bit of chocolate, I know. So, and cheese, lovely, like cheese. fish and chips. And to finish with on this type of thing, nettle soup as being one of the vast numbers of soups which it goes on to about in here. So friends, may I recommend this book to you and say, if you can get hold of it, do read it. It's a wonderful book, but careful though. You'll sit there for, if you get it, you'll sit there for at least 2 hours reading this book because it grips you. It really does. And with that, I will pass on to someone else.
Who'd like to go next?
Yeah, I'll go for something entirely different. Last month was Black History Month, and the libraries always have really, really excellent displays of relevant books. So I was in, I think it was Bristol Central Library, and thought, oh, you know, he's Paul Stevenson. I never met him. He was Roy Hackett was a contemporary of his. I certainly, from Bristol Older People's Forum, knew Roy. I think Paul Stevenson was born in 1937 in Essex, and he's at pains to say his mum was born in England and his grandma, because I think he grew up being told, like Lenny Henry grew up being told, get back to where you come from. And he would say, yeah, but I've got a job in London. I don't want to go back to Essex. Thank you very much. I think Lenny Henry used to say, but there's no work in Dudley. But he was instrumental in, do you remember, in the coach station, I don't know whether you can see it, the Bristol bus boycott of 1963, which was more or less simultaneous with Rosa Parks in America, who refused to give up. No, she wouldn't. She sat down in the white part of a bus and wouldn't move. And the Bristol bus boycott was the same sort of time. What the Bristol Omnibus Company would only employ white men, and so there was a boycott of the bus company. It's quite interesting because it says on the back the Bristol campaigners were victorious on the 28th of August 1963, the Bristol Omnibus Company agreed to lift its colour bar. And by a quirk of fate, the 28th of August 1963 was the day in America when Dr. Martin Luther King said his I Have a Dream speech. So, you know, it was just interesting. He was a very, very principled campaigner. And he was born in 1937, and so he was evacuated. He was born in Essex. He was evacuated, and I think there's a lovely photo, him and the little boy that he was evacuated with. Yeah, there they are, the two of them. They were evacuated. Isn't that a lovely photo? And that apparently was on the cover of the first edition, but it's lovely. So this is a second edition. And it just was very interesting. He comes over as a very quiet, very principled campaigner who, you know, would listen to some of the vile things, you know, that were said of Black people and would very quietly put his point. So it was a very, very, very nice a very good read. And he very much campaigned with Tony Benn, who of course was a Bristol MP. as well as many other things. So yeah, so that was my read. And if you go to the bus station, you'll see the plaque, which is very nice, I think. Yeah, there it is, with Roy Hackett. And you see Bristol. Yeah. There's actually a very nicely designed plaque, actually. It's in the bus station, so it's not very obvious. I know when my two granddaughters were students at Cardiff, I made a point the first time they came to Bristol. I said, I'll meet you at Bristol coach station, and made them look at. I said, we're going to go around Bristol. We're going to find out about Bristol. Look at this. So that's what I've been reading. It's very nice. And I think the thing with Black History Month and the libraries is all of the libraries have excellent displays of books written about Black people by Black people that are relevant to, the particular theme that the library's chosen. So, so that was my read this month. And a very nice read it is too. And it comes over as got quite a sense of humour. Some of his responses to the blatant racism that he experienced by very prominent, and it has to be said, quite often Tories. So an interesting read. I enjoyed it. Very nicely written.
Who's going to come
I
forward?
go next.
Right, go for it, because
Right. One of the books I'm reading at present is this one. I'm not sure if I'm holding it up so you can read it.
The Empress and the English Doctor.
Yeah, by Lucy Ward. It's about Catherine the Great, and I've forgotten the name of the English doctor, but and basically Thomas Dinsdale, and basically he was very interested in inoculating people against smallpox, got to know all the latest ways of doing it, and I believe later on went over and was invited over and did it for Catherine the Great and her son. So and what I've found fascinating so far is that in fact he was born a Quaker, but he married out twice, and although he would have been let back in if only he'd apologized for getting married in front of a priest, but he didn't. And I think even when his mother died, she hoped that he'd bring up his children in the faith which he was brought up in. But I've got no idea yet whether he did or not. So I'm finding it quite interesting, particularly the Quaker connection. At present, I'm a bit, I'm thinking I need to skip a few pages because I'm a bit bogged down in the early life of Catherine the Great, which I must have read about I don't know how many times. So, but it is well written, well researched, and yeah, and one forgets because the World Health Organization has actually been eradicated, but quite what a nasty thing it did. It accounted for most deaths most of the time, and even if you survived it, you're likely to end up pockmarked and that sort of thing. So, and one of the John Woolman, the Quaker, who was, prominent against slavery and various other extremely good things. He was unfortunately one of the religious people, and it is mainly religious people, who were against doing inoculations because, smallpox had obviously been sent by God to, keep people on their toes and remembering what their latter end was going to be. But I've always been rather pleased that John Woolman actually died of smallpox in the end, because, of course, since the time now, it's things like that are dealt with by vaccination, not inoculation. There's inoculation, which I hadn't realised, is actually you introduce some of the disease to the person. Whereas vaccination, you're using something that's dead, but will set off the immune system. So, yeah, I'm quite enjoying that. And I've got 3 more here if you really want to hear about them, but we'll let everybody else have a go before we get on to
Sounds good.
what else we might be reading. So,
Hattie.
Chris, what's the name of this book?
it's called The Empress and the English Doctor.
Oh,
And it's by Lucy Ward.
oh, is it? Okay, sorry, I thought it was by Thomas Dinsdale, because I just didn't disentangle that.
No. And in fact, if you know the £4 bookshop halfway down Park Street, they've got the hardback in there for £4 at present if you want it. I got my copy secondhand in St. Peter's Hospice shop on White Ladies Road, but they only had the one. But and of course other good bookshops and bad bookshops, quite likely to have it. Right.
And the next person it's Hattie.
Well, I don't know. Is it me, or let someone else have a turn first?
Well, since you flashed the book at us, Hattie, I think you should actually go next.
I just wanted to let you know that I have actually, got something to talk about. Yeah. I enjoyed Michael Morpurgo. I've never actually read anything by him as far as I know. And this is called Alone on a Wide, Wide Sea. And honestly, I have really, I just usually take at least a month to read a book. And this is nicely laid out on the page with plenty of space and such. Honestly, I thought I was reading an autobiography, but it's so nice to read that I think 5 sessions and I've gobbled it up. And yesterday afternoon, I was watching the clock to make sure that I went out at 4:30 to get to the Oxfam shop to look for another Morpurgo. And I managed the actual bookshop in Westbury-on-Trim was closed, but the Things shop was open, and I found a little one, and I read that before breakfast this morning. I'm really, really enjoying his style. I don't care if he is a kind of teenager's author or something. I really don't. It's just such a whiz story. And this particular one, The Alone on a Wide, Wide Sea, really is I think it's extremely well researched. Whether he himself loved sailing, but I expect he did. All the details about sailing on a boat. The first thing is he's one of the children who gets shipped off to Australia, which of course is very topical at the moment. And so he speaks about his experience, and very extraordinary it is too, but he speaks about the seriousness of it and the managing to escape, how managing to escape his slavery. And you really feel you're with him. Well, I did. So thank you for letting me share that excitement with you. And I don't know, such an easy read. Yeah.
I'm glad you discovered him, because I think he's a wonderful writer. He's
Oh.
he's most famous for writing a book called War Horse.
Oh, yes, he wrote War Horse.
Mm.
Ah, yes, I forgot that.
There's, among other things. Do search his other books. There are a lot of them out there too. So.
Well, yes, there are. And I'm going to go whilst Oxfam Bookshop is open today and see what else I can find. And I will allow somebody else this back to Oxfam so that they can have a read and it doesn't clutter up my shelves.
Right. And the next one, please. Rosalie.
I'd be happy to go next if I may. I recently finished reading a book which was gifted to me. Pardon me. The author is Claire Keegan, and it's entitled Small Things Like These. Small Things Like These. And if I read the sleeve, it is 1985 in an Irish town. During the weeks leading up to Christmas, Bill Furlong, a coal and timber merchant, faces his busiest season. As he goes round the houses making deliveries, he feels the past rising up to meet him and encounters the complicit silences of a small community controlled by the church. And basically, it's one of the stories relating to the Magdalen laundries. And it's beautifully written, very, short book. But this coalman, as you can imagine, has an insight into all the neighbours and everybody in the town, including the big convent on the hill. And he's delivering coal one day and filling up the coal house, and he discovers a girl in there. And her hair has all been chopped. She's shivering with cold. She's barefoot, and he can see her toenails are long. And he tries to find out why she's in there. So he brings her back to the front door of the convent. And when he enters, and I think it was the what would she be called, the prioress, she ushered them both into the kitchen and made out sort of saying, "Oh, there you are, we've been looking for you, we couldn't find you anywhere, what have you been up to?" And the coalman sort of, is kind of keeping quiet. And he says, "Why would she have been in the coal house?" And the nun said, "Oh, they were probably playing hide and seek and accidentally locked her in." And of course, he knows this is not true. And the nun goes to great lengths to try and cover up what's really happening. And she sends the girl off to have a hot bath and be dressed, and said, "Now bring her back into the kitchen for some breakfast." And this whole charade is carried out to try and pretend, that things are not as they really are. And later on in the story, of course, he discovers she's been locked in again, and he decides to take her out and bring him home to his wife and family over Christmas. I said, it's a very, very moving story and beautifully written. But just in terms of the writing, I'd just love to read the first couple of lines, which will give you a flavour. "In October, there were yellow trees. Then the clocks went back the hour, and the long November winds came in and blew and stripped the trees bare. In the town of New Ross, chimneys threw out smoke, which fell away and drifted off in hairy, drawn-out strings before dispersing along the quays, and soon the river Barrow, dark as stout, swelled up with rain." It's so descriptive and beautiful. But as I said, just a very short read, a kind of human interest story. As I said, it moved me to tears. And of course, it's very topical because there has been stuff on the television different programs about the Magdalen laundries recently. And I will indulge just to say that I'm currently reading Lily's Promise, How I Survived Auschwitz and Found the Strength to Live. And my interest there is because I represent our Quaker meeting on HMD North Somerset. So it's Holocaust Memorial Day, North Somerset, and the group host with local people a memorial event in a different village or town in North Somerset each year. And when we started, one of our first ones was in Pill, and Wendy Martineau wrote a song about Lily's necklace, which her mum had stitched into her skirt when she was being sent away. And a beautiful song has been written about this. But yeah, so that's particularly why I'm drawn to read that. But I'm only a few pages in, so maybe another time I'll tell you how it goes. Thank you, friends.
Brilliant. Patsy.
Well, I've been reading something which I'm afraid everybody else will have known all about, but I didn't. Excuse the tissue, which I do tend to use as a marker. Bad habit. Right. Whoops, hang on a minute. How do I get this into?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the best exotic marigold hotel. I've never read any. Deborah Mogach. How do you pronounce that? Don't know. Mogach. Yeah, I haven't seen the film. I just acquired it and started reading it, and at first I didn't really like it because it introduces the characters one by one. They're principally in London, and you know, over in England, and they're all old, and they're various in their character, whether you like them or not. One or two of them are very likable, one or two of them certainly are not. But somehow or another, they've all become detached from their families and friends and their past lives, and they're living in old people's homes, or in one case, she's very proudly keeping herself in a small flat. But she comes back one day and, well, first of all, she's knocked over. And when she's been picked up and comforted and nothing broken, she gets home, and whoever knocked her over appears to have managed to take her keys, have gone into her flat, stolen her television, and rifled the flat for anything that's of value, leaving the door open. So they're all in a position, I think, where they're unhappy, but not feeling they could do a great deal about it. And then along comes an opportunity to have a different kind of end of life, which is at what gets called the Marigold Hotel. And what this is a business venture being run in India by people of a variety of races. And it's a lovely old, slightly collapsed villa, which they can turn into a hotel, and it's cheap because it's really quite crummy. It's falling apart, but the climate is warm and comfortable, which is nice if you've got rheumatism. And certainly, if I heard of a Marigold Hotel, believe me, I'd be off. I wouldn't mind the fact it was run down. It's the fact it was warm and the smells of India. You know, I think that'd be pretty good. Anyway, all these characters end up there, and although they seem to have nothing in common, of course, it turns out that they do have a great deal in common. In fact, one of them, the lady who has had her home rifled, wants her son to help her, but she can't find out where he is. He does love her. He's very loving and helpful to her when he's around, but he's a rather dodgy businessman, and currently the police are looking for him which makes getting hold of him rather difficult. But in fact, while she's at the Marigold Hotel, he turns up by a series of events which are actually quite believable. I suppose it's a bit of a happy ever after story. But what I enjoyed very much was the characterization, the way I started off not liking any of the characters much, but I persevered and I ended up really feeling I could easily relate to any of them, and I found a great deal about myself in them, which is perhaps why I didn't like them much in the beginning. And of course, I would absolutely love to go and live in the slightly collapsed hotel in India, however. So that's what this is a book I've made last. I'm reading it at the moment. So I read it in bed, and by the time I get to read a book of fiction in bed, I'm too tired to read very much at a time. So, which is nice. It's the sort of books you want for that, because you can make it last, and you can really look forward to this at the end of the day when you've done all the other things which are of much greater benefit, hopefully, to yourself and humanity. I have got another book I'm reading, but I think if we all have a go, perhaps, would that be, don't know.
Yeah.
Come back. I think everybody else has said something, so maybe it's my turn.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's kind of embarrassing. I was thinking, well, what books am I reading? So, I went off and,
Yeah.
which one am I going to talk about? Well, first off, of course, I've got Jeffrey Smith's book about insulation, but we got a talk from him, and it's very much written in Jeffrey's lovely sort of dry style of humor. And my cousin in Bath gave me this lovely book, The Salt Path by Raynor Winn, which is a
beautiful, yeah.
Lady and her husband get kind of turfed out of the farm they've lived much of their life, and they go off on this adventure. But I can't tell the whole story because I start lots of books, and then eventually I get through them, but I get caught up on them. And here's one. This is a friend of mine. This is Dream Gods by Miguel Mendonca. And there's always something special about reading a book by someone you know. And Miguel used to be he's had done many things in his life, but he's been a researcher for the World Future Council. And then he sort of got burned out doing that and started writing science research and, in effect, science fiction books. And this is his latest book, which is a novel about the wonderful idea of an interplanetary thief who comes and steals the dreams of people. And he is caught by a lady who we never quite find out what she's doing there, but he's stealing the dreams of the American president. And this woman steps out from behind the curtain and sort of susses that he's an alien and says, take me with you. I want to go on an adventure. So the whole book is about this adventure and the dream gods is stealing and trading in people's dreams. So one of the sweet things about science fiction is you can explore, ideas that are, well beyond credible. You create a credible universe and you can populate it with ideas. And then this is an interesting one. Bristol Festival of Ideas, which I went to. I discovered on one Monday a couple of weeks ago that it was Bristol Festival of the Future City. And I basically spent the week in the watershed going to as many events as I could do. And this is a radical shattered nation, inequality, and the geography of a failing state. And it's, this is our lives. This is the decline of Great Britain under Margaret Thatcher and those who followed her, and the dismantling of all our wonderful services. And this guy really explains it in, scary detail. very, very clear, powerful speaker. And it was like, you know, I've got to get this book. But, you know, it's on the pile. Another book from my cousin John Burko's book, Unspeakable, which is, you know, he's a kind of hero in some ways, but he's like so boisterous that it makes for, you know, it does make politics quite interesting. And then you think, no, this is just John Burko talking it up. And a lot of what he's seeing really isn't so exciting. But the one book this is the book that I keep coming back to. It's a book called Anastasia, and it's from a series of 9 books called The Ringing Cedars of Russia by a man called Vladimir Megray. And
I've mentioned him before, David.
yeah, I've read the whole series. Well, you know, and you know, it's the book I'd take with me if I was on desert island discs, because there's something about finding a woman living in nature, representing a civilization that we really haven't heard of, and living in tune with nature. And they quite poignantly, in the middle of the series, right in the middle of the middle book in the series, he writes an open letter to Vladimir Putin about how you could create an ideal country in Russia by building eco-villages around our cities, getting people to live more in tune with nature, running our cities, having your city parliaments, councils, run by people who are living in eco-villages around the city. So they spend time in nature. It's, you know, the book is packed with brilliant ideas and fresh thinking. And I keep coming back to the whole series because I find it so inspiring. And, you know, it's wonderful to read books and to be carried away on people's ideas. But when a book is actually a blueprint for transforming society, there's a sort of sadness in there, because, you know, as you're saying, Patsy, if you know, if you could find a Marigold hotel, you know, you'd be there like a shot. And I would love to live in a community that had the elements of this. And there are eco villages built on this model across Europe, and there isn't one in this country yet. So I'm still interested to live in an eco village that's been built by people who are inspired by this idea of living in tune with nature. It's not get away from it all. It's actually tune into what is our natural heritage, which is what we've lost. Anyway,
David, thank you, David.
Plenty of time. Patsy and
the time for everybody to have a quick, if you have another book and you think of it, a quick go round. You don't have to, but you can if you want to. And mine is a bloke which I find just amazing. He started his acting life in up north and came down to Bristol Theatre School to carry on his service. And it's a bloke who everybody knows shouts a lot. It's the amazing Brian Blessed, and this is his biography. It's a stunner. It will make you laugh, be unhappy, but the man's brilliant. I don't use that word too often, but I think he's just a super chap, and his biography is worth reading. As Patsy says, this is my bedtime book. I can sit late and read it, and an hour's gone sometimes. But there you go. Brian Blessed, worth reading. Christopher, you want another book?
Right, yeah. Another book that I've got on the go is something totally different. Peter Crouch, How to Be a Footballer. Now, I was thinking last night that I think I'd throw it away, well, you know, give it to a charity shop without bothering to read any more of it. But I've then been thinking, oh, I want to go back to this. He's just very, I mean, it's a life that, you know, I've got no knowledge about at all, you know, I mean, you know, at the top of the profession, but it's full of fascinating things like, you know, nowadays, you know, all their kit's prepared for them and everything's laid out. But, you know, one of the things that isn't laid on, and he says, you know, you end up after a max in the shower with, you know, a dozen millionaires and nobody's got any shower gel or anything to wash themselves with because it's not actually provided and they don't remember to bring it. And I think the other thing that struck me, he was talking about the sort of changing rooms they had when he started out in football, which of course were similar to the sort of thing we had at school when I was young. I mean, I've never enjoyed sport, and yeah, the kind of disgustedness of the changing rooms is yeah, it kind of brought it back to me. So he writes very well, and it's something completely different. And I think the next section I'm going to read is about tattoos, because I think he feels as I do about them. I think I might enjoy it more if I read it, you know, not necessarily in order.
You have another book, Patsy, you said.
Oh yes, I've got. This chap here, Tropical Capricorn, Simon Reeve. He does a lot of television programs and series, but he travels all over the. I'm not holding this badly, aren't I? Just a second. There we are. Tropical Capricorn. It's one of many that Simon has written. Where's he gone? I don't know how he finds time to write anything because he does do so much traveling. I know there are a lot of these travel programs on television. And I don't know what made me decide I'd like to buy one of his books, because it doesn't follow that because there's good television programs of this person, they'll write a good book. But he writes wonderfully, absolutely thrillingly. You know, I've got this really bad habit during the day when I'm meant to be doing completely different things of picking up books that are around and reading them. And instead, and at the moment I've got 2 or 3 Simon Reeve books of different Simon Reeve traveling in different parts of the world, and each one separately is so enthralling that I can't really walk past it. In fact, this morning I had to cover that one to make sure I didn't pick it up and was late for 11 o'clock. He writes really well, and even though I've got more than one of his books on the go, it doesn't matter. You can tell easily which one you're in because he's not just the descriptive writer, he's highly political. I don't know how he gets away with some of the interviews he's managed to hold. I'm thinking now of the films he makes. I don't know how he got away with it. He obviously goes into considerable danger. But it's been wonderful for me. I've really found it possible to pull together more, for me, the politics of what's happening, mainly for, you know, the result of capitalism and anyway, around the world. He's got, and yet he can do this with humour and most of all with colour. You just can't forget what he writes about, and at the same time you are aware of the implications. So, anyway, so Simon Reeve is somebody I've got around a lot at the moment.
Patty.
Well, you might have read this in the past because it's not a new book, but it's certainly the longest book I've ever managed to get through. Took me over a year, I suppose. Wild Swans. Can I remember the author? David's looking it up. Anyway, absolutely wonderful book. So enlightening and full of the active history of China. You know, this person was involved, and her relatives. It's about 3 generations of people from China, and she's the one who's landed up in North America. And I just think it's so well written and so interesting. I couldn't wait to get back to it each time. I think thick book.
Jung
But
Chang.
Hmm?
Jung Chang.
There's
Jung
something
with a Y or a J?
JUNGCHANG.
Yes. Anyway, that my absolute great memory.
That's such a comforting feeling, isn't it? A nice thick book. You know, if you know you like it and it's a nice thick one, there's something extra about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That's
Yes, I can't
Chris
remember what it's called, but there's a half-hour, I think, book program that's come back on the BBC. I think it was.
good read.
Yes, and I can't remember which of the people it was there, but you know, he reminded me of how bereft you can feel when you finished a novel, and the characters aren't part of your life anymore. So, yeah. Right. Sorry.
I think I can safely say here there's something about a book, something about a physical book, which to me is more than the Kindle or something like that. Although Kindle might be good on holidays, less weight and all that lot, but to have an actual physical book that you've got hold and you can read, I think it never leaves me. The pleasure of that never leaves me in that sense. And I've been reading since I was 4 years old. 69 years ago today. Anyway, anybody else for any more for today?
I'd just
Go ahead.
I'd just like to mention, I was chatting with a friend of mine the other day, and she's got a son, and her life is very bitty. She's got 4 jobs and her son to raise, and and her husband to relate to and feed and everything. Anyway, so quite a complex life. And she said since the beginning of the year, on audiobooks, she's listened to 63 books because she can listen to them while she's doing other things. 63. And they won't go any faster. You can't read any faster. They just speak the speed they speak. Yeah. She did try to be a reader.
That's that phrase. Sorry, carry on.
She did try to be a reader for them. And they persistently said that the background hum from her computer was intrusive and they couldn't accept the recordings. And that's a bit extraordinary to me. So, I mean, this happened, I think she must have had 3 refusals or something. She tried in different environments and put it on sound absorption and all the rest of it, but it didn't work. So she's never become a reader, but she's a great reader.
As someone once said, Lieutenant, and it's something which I agree with, and I have said it quite often. I haven't met anybody yet who doesn't like being read to, who doesn't like being told stories. It's within our DNA, as that well-hacked phrase goes, but it's still very true. David?
Yeah, well, on the audiobook theme, I've come across on YouTube a few, people write books on Reddit, it seems, and then people pick them up and narrate them on YouTube. And there's a guy in Cumbria who goes by the name Ad Astra, who picks up books that he's found on Reddit, and I've followed 2 of them. I mean, he's coming towards the end of one at the moment, and one whole series which I really enjoyed, and I was gutted when it came to the end, was Why Humans Avoid War, which was it's a science fiction series, and he was raring to go on the next series. And coming to towards the end, the denouement of the nature of predators, and the little 15-minute episodes that he publishes like every other day. So I'm, just of an evening, I'm looking around to see that there are several people whose blogs I follow, typically science blogs, but these science fiction stories are a nice little filler of an evening. So there's a point where these things are books, but it's all electronic. But it is lovely to have this narrator is using different voices, synthesized some of them, and it's it really makes the stories come very, very, very alive.
Hattie.
Yeah. A friend of mine who's hopefully at the tail end of her long COVID, but there came a point where she couldn't concentrate and she couldn't read, and she asked her husband to read to her, and that has been really a lifesaver for her, which was a marvelous thing that he was able to do. And then the other thing is, during lockdown, I just had an inspiration to use the local WhatsApp group on our street and read a children's book, and just do a couple of minutes of read each day to children's book, short one, and do the characterization of the characters and stuff. And I really enjoyed to do that. So I'm not surprised Ad Astra likes doing it as well.
And he writes and talks as well about the fun he has, finding the books and doing the narrations. He's really into it. But of course, there's a lot of people watching these things, and on YouTube you can leave comments. So the author or the narrator is getting feedback, and oh, that was a real cliffhanger. I'm not sure I can wait for the next episode.
That goes back to nearly Dickensian times, when most of Dickens' books came out in episodes, and so you had people. Yeah,
people waited for the boat to come in New York, saying, "What's happened to little Nell?" Apparently.
They were nearly your first kind of nearly soaps on written. But unfortunately, my dear friends, I have to leave you now, because I've got to go and dash off somewhere. And so I have enjoyed this time with us immensely. And as that phrase goes, let's do this again sometime. But from me, it's good afternoon, and I will see you again soon.
What's happening?
Shall I just say next week? We've got. Oh, hang on a minute. Yes, it's. I can't. Oh dear, what's his name? I can't see his name.
Sturge.
Thank you. It's going to be talking about Quaker work in Germany in the 30s, dilemmas facing an evil regime. So that's next time. So I didn't have that ready earlier.
Right.
Hope to see you next week.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, everybody.